remains of ancient horned Nephilim and giants found all across North America. Well, they've been found all over the world, but we're concentrating in North America right now because the reality is that not many archaeological excavations have been done, and there's so much to find here. We'll see mounds, burial mounds that are reminiscent of what we find, for example, in ancient Greece, Asia Minor, in Troy, in the area of where Achilles' tomb is. We're going to have a video on that that's fascinating. And they used to bury their heroes in mounds, just like we have in Marathon. Some of these mounds look just like the Marathon mound of the Battle of Marathon against the Persians, which happened about 500 BC. This is a giant skull. A lot of people say this is a baby skull. No, it's a giant skull of a child that has been found in the United States. And we've already talked about the fact that ancient Greek, Minoan, Crete DNA has been found in the American Indians, all the Indians around the Great Lakes area. That ties in with what Plato has written concerning the trade routes that came from the Mediterranean, from the ancient Greeks, the Minoans, all the way up to Britain. They used to trade whatever was in the Mediterranean, like olives, wine, pottery, ceramics, dried raisins, dried figs, things like that. And they would bring back tin from Britain. And they also went across to Iceland, through to Greenland. From there, they went through to Labrador and down to the Great Lakes, where they mined at least 500,000 tons of copper. The archaeologists have recently found that they have found the mines, the copper mines are empty, and they have found tools down there, ancient tools. And they did leave a little bit of copper for the Native American Indians to have as their jewelry. But the DNA of the ancient Minoans have been found in the Native Americans around the Great Lakes. Now the thing is, the Minoans, the people from ancient Crete, were also known as, described in the Old Testament of the Bible, as the Philistines. They were giants. The Philistines, as we know, Goliath, David and Goliath of the Old Bible, the Philistines were giants. They also went, it looks like, before the eruption of the volcano of Santorini, the Thera volcano, which was around 1500, 1600 BC. They did not find any bodies there, which means that everybody fled the island before the eruption. They must have had a lot of precursor events, and they left. And they settled across towards the Levant, which today is Syria, Lebanon, and also Israel, and even down. They even came down to Egypt. And the archaeologists say they could have had what is called a non-conflicting invasion of Egypt, in that they bought the area. They were high-tech people. They were also giants. And they also, of course, settled in North America. Now, a lot of people say that this has also to do with the Atlanteans. The Atlantean Thoth of the Emerald Tablets described that before the sinking of Atlantis, some Atlanteans did go to the other areas of the earth. They established cities. The first thing they built was pyramids. It could be that they used them as power generators. And they also had, of course, their airplanes. They had flight. They also had spaceships for interplanetary travel. And they had even the knowledge of interdimensional whipping back and forth. I guess they were able to somehow change their frequencies and disappear from human sight, because our eyesight can't see all frequencies. Anyway, they had established themselves worldwide. And we know that also Thoth Hermes Trismegistus built the Giza pyramids with a luxurious city underneath. There's also a luxurious city under the Saqqara pyramids of Egypt, but he built the Giza pyramids, and he tells us in the Emerald Tablets, and you'll find a playlist in my videos on the Emerald Tablets, and I would advise, as you're drinking some coffee or having dinner, listen to them, because it's a lot of stuff in there as to ancient technology. and it ties in with a lot of things that we're seeing lately, and finding also. And he says in there that he had a spaceship and he's buried his spaceship under a sphinx. So it's logical for us to deduce that since he built the Giza pyramids, perhaps his spaceship is under the Sphinx of Giza that we see now, which about 100 or so years ago was still buried up to the neck in sand. A lot of people say that there's a second pyramid close by, a second Sphinx close by, which has not yet been excavated. Anyway, that's just a little bit of an introduction. We also know that the hero Achilles was a giant. Also, Agamemnon's son, Orestes, was a giant. And as far as Alexander the Great, when he went to visit Achilles' tomb in Asia Minor, and we're going to do a video on that, because there's a lot to do there. All those heroes of the Trojan War are buried there. And he even took off his clothes in order to be totally naked when he went into the tomb of Achilles, out of respect. That's what his other generals did with the other heroes of the area when they went to pay homage to the other heroes. And they found the shield of Achilles in the tomb. It's like a chamber, big chamber. And the shield was 150 pounds, and it took over 3 men with difficulty to lift it. And that's how they understood that Achilles was, of course, a very big giant, and as also written in the texts of Plato. But I want to read some ancient, well, not ancient, but old articles for you, having to do with the fine horned men's skulls in Susquehanna Valley, Pennsylvania. The clipping, remarkable discovery by archaeologists in Susquehanna Valley, Pennsylvania, dispatched to Philadelphia Record, the archaeologists who are traversing the Susquehanna River to the bay, visiting sites in Indian villages and digging up shocking and other relics are said to have. That's part of it. And then the other one, Chemung's predecessors, huge giants, were 7 feet tall and had horns. Now remember, this is an article from July 12, 1916. You have to remember that the people then, at that time, were quite short. I mean, if they were 4.5, 5 feet tall, I guess that was the average height. The pilgrims that came over from England to the new land were very short. I mean, I had gone to the replica of the Mayflower in Boston, and that replica was 25% bigger, and we had to duck to get in. And it was 25% bigger, so you can imagine how short these people were. So 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, of course, were giants to them because they were almost twice their height. It says here, July 12th, 1916, one of the most remarkable scientific discoveries in history made here. 68 skeletons of men living 700 years ago. So 700 years, they were living around 1200. They were still alive and they were giant, okay? 68 skeletons of men living 700 years ago, unearthed between Sayre and Waverly. Men were old at 40. And I can't make out the rest of it, but anyway, that's the report of it. And we have also the fact that they found the horned skull here, humanoid horned skull in Pennsylvania. So all of these mysteries and eerie archaeological discoveries, none matches the Sayre burial mound in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. This is where they found the horned skull. The burial mound was found at the end of the 19th century by the fluke of 3 researchers unaware of what was lying underneath their feet. The 3 researchers were a group of distinguished antiquarians, including the Pennsylvania state historian and dignitary of the Presbyterian Church, Dr. G.P. Donahue, A.B. Skinner of the American Investigative Museum, and W.K. Morehead of Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. Instead of finding Native American bodies at Spanish Hill, the researchers unraveled beneath the burial mound several outlandish skeletons due to their impressive height of over 7 feet. These skeletons in particular represented another trait that has never been recorded among humans: real horns protruding from their heads, from their foreheads, 2 inches above their eyebrows, It's estimated that they had been buried in the 13th century AD. More intriguing is the fact that the local people reported bizarre apparitions that closely resemble the horned skeletons found in the Sayre burial mound. Like many fresh archaeological findings, soon after the skeletons were sent to the Philadelphia Museum, they were allegedly stolen or, quote-unquote, misplaced and lost. That happens everywhere. Somehow, even here in Greece, they found these huge skeletons, and some people came, took them for study, and they were never heard or seen about again. For this very, very strange. Anyway, apparently these pieces of history could have shed some light on the prehistoric inhabitants of North America of those days. On the other side, some claim these skeletons are the remains of beings who served for higher purposes, suggesting a culture of the Nephilim and their offspring, altogether forming the Shining Ones, quote-unquote, often depicted as being with horns. The horns symbolize wisdom and rulership, and this correlation can be seen in many shamanistic cultures, even in the Holy Bible. Kyros meaning horn. Okay, do you remember the Archangel Gabriel went to, in the Old Testament, to the prophet Daniel and told him about a little horn coming from the north, meaning Alexander the Great. The little horn, and he was a young king, okay? So that's the symbolism used even then in the Old Testament. So the horn symbolizes wisdom and rulership, and this correlation can be seen in many shamanistic cultures where members ornate their heads with horns. According to a theory of writer Mary Sutherland, the use of horns as garnishment and headpieces was done to display kinship with the Atlantean bloodline with the right to rule. Okay? Now, below we saw the article, we already read them, that made public the story of the horned skeleton in a page of the Morehead Expedition. And according to Deb Twigg, Executive Director of the Susquehanna River Archaeological Center of Native Indian Studies, SRAC, this is the headline from the earliest news article that she could find. It's from 1916 as opposed to 1880s. This article goes on to say that this, quote, one of the most remarkable scientific discoveries in history made here, 68 skeletons of men living 700 years ago unearthed between Sayre and Waverley, end quote. A queer fellow, he was 7 feet in height, horns protruding from the skull. Horns of solid bone which grew straight out from the skull about 2 inches above the perfectly formed skull, which gave every evidence of having been there since his birth. The legends of many Native Americans tell of an early race of giants, responsible for the megalithic structures that can be found across all of North America. When the first settlers asked the Native Americans about the peculiar megalithic structures, they came with an answer that would not satisfy the skeptics. The entire land was inhabited a very long time ago by an ancient race of powerful people that had emerged from the sea. Is this the pure truth that some perplexing legends hold, or a simple deceitful maneuver of the Native Americans to hide a greater knowledge that very few are chosen to understand? It's easier to lie when mixed with conservative elements of truth. Until any traces of the misplaced or stolen skeletons exhibits are to be discovered, many questions will remain unanswered. In the need for answers, those who seek will eventually propose new elaborate and possibly more accurate theories regarding their origin, their purpose, and what caused their extinction if it ever happened. Now the words Nephilim, Nephil, as we saw in the past videos, you'll see the one having to do with the giants in the Old Testament, the records of giants in the Old Testament. Now I put up giants recorded in the Old Testament according to historical time. That's the video before last. Nephil means giant in Aramaic. Nephilim is the plural for giant. Nephil is one giant, Nephilim is one or more. So the word Nephilim orbit around the identity of the horned skeleton remains, but the possibilities are countless, and we'll have to wait the white coat's final verdict until wherever it will happen. So that's what they found, And tell me what you think. Obviously, there's a lot to be said here. And one of the previous videos, the pale prophet or ancient alien visited North America. That has to do with what could be the Atlanteans and the Hyperboreans, the giants of the advanced technology that had luxurious underground bases under mountains. And one of the people that lost his beloved fiance, the woman he was supposed to marry, had died, and he didn't want to live anymore. He went up there to the mountain. They told him to leave. He said, no, I don't want to live anymore. He went up there with the risk of his life, and they invited him down to their luxurious, dwellings under earth, underground. And they told him a lot of things. He told them about his people, and then they told him to go back and tell them what he learned from them. So he came back with the stories having to do with these pale-faced prophets, these giants of advanced technology, which could very well be the Atlanteans, because, even in the area of Peru today, there are a lot of people, Brian Forrester goes there with some people once in a while, and there's this doctor, this archaeologist who takes people up there, and he was describing from a video I saw on YouTube recently, how they are still around and they don't come out except when it's twilight. It's either very early dawn or just before sunset, because their skin can't take the sun. These people were around before we had the strong sun. Before we had the ability for our atmosphere to give us rainbows. We never had rainbows until after the flood, and Noah was given the sign by God of the rainbow. So these people are still around underground, and they only come out at twilight, according to this archaeologist in Peru. And he says, don't go, we tell people not to go around these sites around twilight, because they come out at twilight, and anyone that's around there is in danger, very, very grave danger. And, okay, so we're tying all this together. We're learning various things from these archaeologists and these ancient texts, and also these ancient legends, but also the evidence of these artifacts having to do with these very strange humanoid skulls with the horns. So tell me what you think. Thank you for your support. Please ring the bell for updated videos, subscribe and share and comment. Thank you. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.